Starry River, Chapter 37. I don't understand about the moon, Pei said, gently stroking its smooth surface with a single finger. It's very beautiful, and it's big, but it isn't big enough for Wang Yi's wife to live on. Isn't she supposed to have a palace on it? Well, that's because the moon has fallen from the sky, Madame Chang said. She was hovering around it like a white-winged moth. The moon is like a closed flower now. When it enters the Starry River, it expands, and a palace of water, jade, and pearl grows. Well, how do we get the moon back into the sky? Jiming asked. I think that's the problem. Maybe if we roll it into the lake, Rindu started. No, Mr. Shan said. He was dripping wet, but he didn't seem to notice. He held his book in his arms as if it were a newborn child and said, "The sky cannot reflect the lake. The moon must be returned to the sky." It's very late, Master Chow cut in. I think we will not be able to return the moon tonight. Yes, Widow Chan said. We could go back to the village. Should we take the moon there? Pei asked. They all looked at it, round and glowing. It was full of quiet tranquility that Rindy did not wish to disturb. The others must have felt the same way, for they all nodded when Mei Lan said, I think we should leave the moon right here. But not by itself, Pei said. Who knows what will happen to it next? Someone should stay with it, Widow Yan agreed. I will stay with it, Mr. Shan said. He looked at Madame Chang, whose eyes had not left the moon since it appeared. It will not disappear again. Rindy looked curiously at Mr. Shan. His long white beard still trickled the delicate stream of water, but the spaces between his wrinkles were few and small. But his eyes had lost their dull, absent look and now sparkled like cut crystals. You'll stay all night? Rindy said. Mr. Shan nodded. The toad, back in his familiar pocket, croaked in agreement. Mr. Shan sat down cross-legged against the moon and opened his precious book on his lap. With a look of great contentment he began to read. Pei giggled. You look just like the sage in Madame Chang's story, she laughed. What sage? Jiming asked. It's a story that Madame Chang told us, Rindy said. It was about a sage who had a book with all this knowledge in it, like The Secret to Peace and things like that. Well, then, Mr. Shan, Jiming joked, do you know The Secret to Peace? Mr. Shan looked up. His dark eyes, once confused, were now bright with wise. Yes, he said, I remember everything now. The secret to peace is forgiveness. His words hung in the air like small, ripe apples dangling from a branch. All were silent. Mr. Shan bowed his head again to read again. When Master Chow nodded at Widow Yan, without a word, Widow Yan stepped forward, took Mei Lan's hand, and placed it in Jiming's. Chapter 38. The next day, when the edges of the sky began to darken like a delicate cloth soaking in ink, Pei burst into Madame Chang's room. Both Madame Chang and Rindy, who had been filling the lanterns with oil, looked at her in surprise. Madame Chang, you have to fix it! What's wrong? Rindy asked, alarmed. They think the moon should be taken into the city, Pei said, and the king should figure out how to return it to the sky, and Jiming is going to be the one to take it. It took a minute for Rindy to untangle Pei's words. The they Pei mentioned was most likely the crowd of villagers downstairs. The villagers had learned of the story of Jiming and the moon, as if it had been told by thunder, and one by one they had come into the inn to discuss, argue, and decide the fate of the moon. The dining room of the inn was now completely full. The villagers think the moon should be brought back to the king? Rindy asked. That's not a bad idea. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because to take the moon to the king, someone has to roll it to the city, Pei said. And it's going to be Jiming. He just got home. He shouldn't leave again. Why is he leaving? Everyone leaves. Pei began to sob and then threw herself into Madame Chang's arms. Rindy awkwardly, but looked at Madame Chang with worry. Pei, Madame Chang said, gently peeling away Pei's arms so that she could look in her eyes. Sometimes people must leave. But why? Pei wept. Madame Chang thought for a moment before she spoke. For the night there is day, for the sun there is moon. For people to come, people must go, she said. It's part of the balance. Well, why do we need balance then? Pei said, her lower lip jutting out stubbornly. Pei, it's like the stories, Rindy said, trying to be helpful. When there were too many suns, people burned, and when there was no sun, people were cold. It has to be even. And then he had a sudden thought. If the sun was fire, then that meant the moon was water. Did the village of Clear Sky, unlike everywhere else, still have water because the moon had been so near? And was there no rain because there was no moon in the sky? Yes, Madame Chen said, nodding. We need balance to have harmony. But I don't want to... But I don't want it to be Jiming who leaves, Pei wailed. I know, Madame Chang said, patting her head. And this time he won't. Jiming won't have to leave. Really? Pei sniffed. Yes, Madame Chang said. And then she added softly but firmly, and I will never leave. Every night of your life, I will be there for you. She looked again into Pei's eyes, as if trying to fill her with light. Rindy watched as Pei's tears disappeared and her hiccuping figure calmed into peaceful stillness. Madame Chang sat Pei softly on the bed. I will go talk to the villagers, she said. And what will you say? Pei asked. The truth, Madame Chang said. Taking the moon to the kings is the wrong thing to do. Chapter 39. Madame Chang left the room with Rindy following close behind. Even before they were all the way down the stairs, they could hear the voices of Master Chow, Jiming, and the villagers. The moon must be taken to the king immediately, a villager said. And if the king does not know what to do, then he can take it to the emperor. The moon must return to the sky without delay. Yes, another villager said. The king or the emperor must take action at once. The moon belongs to all the people, and they are responsible for the welfare of the people. The king and the emperor are responsible for the moon. They are not the only ones responsible, Jiming said in a wry tone, which Rindy could understand. Oh, I said it wrong. Let's say it again. They weren't the only ones responsible, Jiming said in a wry tone, which Rindy could understand. Until today, the villagers had been unconcerned about the missing moon, but now, as Madame Chang and Rindy stood in the room, they were all fervent and alarmed. I will roll the moon to the king, Jiming continued, but it is a long journey to the city of far remote, especially on foot, and it is unknown when I'll return. So before I leave, I insist that I am allowed to marry Mei Lan, and in my absence she is treated as my honored wife. More than anyone, Rindy could hear sorrow and braveness, Rindy could hear sorrow and the brave sadness of sacrifice in Jiming's voice. Rindy remembered the yearning in Jiming's eyes when he had been the toad. Jiming had wanted desperately to return home, but now he was leaving again. We can have the wedding tomorrow, Master Chow said, as all the heads in the room nodded in agreement, except for Madame Chang's. Jiming should not move the moon, Madame Chang said, and they all turned to look at her. The king can do nothing. Only a mountain can hold up the moon. But then, is it right for Jiming to take the moon? Master Chow said in a self-important way. Our ancestor moved a mountain. Jiming will move the moon. Your ancestor did not move the mountain, Madame Chang said in a voice louder than Rindy had ever heard her use before. Madame Chang slowly looked at each villager, and one by one, each dropped his or her eyes and fell silent, overwhelmed by the force of her gaze. It was as if Madame Chang had removed a translucent veil. Her smooth, pale face seemed to illuminate the room, and Rindy again felt the awe-inspiring sensation of wishing to kneel at her feet. Poor villagers of clear sky, she said in a softer tone. It has been so long, yet you still do not see. Your sky is not clear. Your sky is empty. Let me tell you the true story of your mountain. The story of the mountain that moved. This village was once in the village of Endless Mountain, renowned for its peace and wisdom. The Moon Lady above was responsible for peace, but the wisdom was mostly because of the spirit of the mountain, who often took the form of a human bestowing advice on those who sought him. Endless Mountain was honored and revered by all. But as time passed, and people slowly began to forget about the spirit of the mountain, and even about the Moon Lady, the villagers became thoughtless and began having small, foolish arguments. And when a new family moved into the village, none noticed the warnings of their approaching fate. The wife and sons were loyal and humble, but the father was domineering and thoughtless. On a whim, he decided he wanted a tea made of Nangling water, and forced his son to carry him to the long river and stupidly risked all their lives as they rowed him into the fierce waves. If he began to lose at a game of chess, he promptly quit playing. When 2 baby oxen were born, he was so impatient to get them to his stable that he tied them by the tails and dragged them home. The Moon Lady and the Mountain of the Spirit looked down at him with disapproving eyes. One day, the man decided that the mountain was great. The never-ending mountain whose tip touched the moon was a hindrance. This mountain blocks my view, he sputtered. We must move it. So he gathered shovels and pails and ordered his obedient sons to dig. All day the sons, and even the wife, carried away rock and dirt, one bucket at a time. As the sun sank behind the mountain, the workers cast silent, pleading eyes up at the sky. So saddened by their plight, the Moon Lady entreated the spirit of the mountain to interfere. The spirit of the mountain had barely noticed the buckets of rock that had been moved, feeling it the way one of us would feel the loss of a single hair. But the Moon Lady's appeal had roused him, and he found himself surprised and curious. The villagers had taken to watching the odd labor, some to jeer and some to encourage, but none tried to stop it. Taking human shape, the spirit of the mountain went to visit the man. "Why are you trying to remove the mountain?" the spirit asked. "Why spend your every hour, every day of your life on something so meaningless?" "This mountain of annoyance will be moved," the man swore. "If I do not move the mountain in my lifetime, my sons will continue my work, and their sons after, until this mountain bothers no one again. It is stupid, unnecessary mountain that is meaningless." With those words, the mountain spirit felt an anger build inside him, a cold, hard anger, like a rock freezing in ice. The mountain was unnecessary. He was stupid and meaningless. For countless generations the spirit had guided and helped the villagers, and now they wished to cast him away like refuse from a chamber pot. The mountain was filled with bitterness and resentment. How could he? He could not stay. He would leave. The mountain would be an annoyance no longer. The Moon Lady was alarmed, for she knew without the mountain to anchor it, the moon could fall from the sky. But the mountain spirit, too angry and hurt, did not hear her words. He refused to stay where he was unwanted. So the next day, the village of Endless Mountain was no longer. The never-ending mountain left, leaving behind only the flat, bare stone. The land was empty, just like the sky. A clear sky, your great-grandfather said, Madame Chang told to Jiming, who had listened with sudden understanding. And this place was called the Village of Clear Sky. But that is also when people began to leave this village. And now it is becoming empty, just like the stone pancake and the sky above. That's just all the more reason. That's just all the more reason to return the moon, a villager said. The king cannot do anything, Madame Chang said, as if declaring a proclamation. She looked out at the sunset. But everything will return. Tomorrow, at this time. Do not forget. And with those words, Madame Chang turned and left out the back of the inn, her hair floating around her pale face so that it looked like the moon itself in a midnight cloud. Stopping point. To be continued.